Salutations, dear humans. Hello there, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining me for the Rediscover Human podcast. Another episode I've got for you today. It's been a couple of weeks since the last one. I listened back to it. I think it's important practice. I actually, I wrote it and, guided it and was in it. I'm aware of some flaws as I go through it. And then I don't want to listen back to it. But I feel like it's an important practice that I do listen back to it because it's a chance for me to, hopefully get better and get better at conveying the message and become better on the microphone. It's definitely a challenge, as I think I mentioned before, doing it on my own and kind of one-man band, and it's going to take some reps. So yeah, thanks for listening and tuning in and bearing with me. I noticed a lot of ums and a lot of likes on the last one, and I certainly would do my best to not do that as much. There we go. Good start. The last one is funny because it was about faith. And I wrote 2 pages of notes going into it on paper. And then as I typed up those notes, it became 9 pages on the computer of A4 on Word document that I was using to guide me. And it's funny in a way that's almost a lack of faith. Not that it's a lack of faith, because it is good to have notes to guide you, and this is early days. But I hope as I get better, I'm able to do it with less notes. But it's as it was about faith, and I had 9 notes because in some ways I didn't have faith that I'd be able to deliver the message just off my dome. But I'm still learning as I go and growing. So we've got 4-5 pages of notes today. So kind of half the amount of notes. But the thing that I do notice is that because I'm reading the notes and I don't want to miss a point, like I said in the video I released lately, the Day in the Life video I put up last week, that I did my podcast, and I've got these notes, and it'd be frustrating if you get to the end of delivering a podcast about a subject and then you're like, oh, I missed that point out. I really, so the more notes I have, the less I feel like I'm going to have to come across that feeling. And as I write the notes, everything kind of expands and becomes it develops a way for me to deliver the message. So there's definitely a place for it. The only thing I notice the most little bit, that I don't dislike about it is the fact that I then end up reading the notes and the delivery of it is not the most soulful in a way, as though if I was telling a story, or when you kind of sharing and it feels like channeling, where it's just the message is coming through you and there's a vibrancy to it. Whereas when you're reading off of notes, it can take that away from it. So I hope to get better, and I hope to grow and blend the two, because there's a place for both of them. So I hope to develop, and I hope this is a slightly more a better version than last time. But yeah, here we go. The point is, though, that I just need to show up. And I wrote this, I started writing the subject of this a few days ago, once again, for about 5-6 days ago. I had a bit of a sleepless night. The subject came to me, turned my side light with no blue light in it, my little orange side light on, and wrote the notes for the subject. And then I've been busy and put it off. And then the thing is, the further it goes in the background, the more you don't want to do it. And I was like, woke up today in a strange place, and I was like, today's the day I should do it. It's a Thursday. I told myself I'd do them on Thursdays. And then I was thinking of every reason not to do it. And I was like, nope, Tim, you've just got to show up and do it. Accept the imperfection. And that is absolutely part of getting on with the work, really, isn't it? Trusting the long process and just showing up and getting the reps in. So here we are. Thank you for joining me today. We're talking about honing in on health. So a few episodes ago, we talked about the battle for health. And today I hope to kind of dig deeper into a way that I can hopefully offer some of my experiences and sort of a guideline or a structure to work through your own health from. And so just as we start, I'd just like to obviously welcome everyone to listening, but also we're going to talk about within this, we're going to talk about health, and that is physical. I've broken it into 4 categories, and there's different ways of breaking it up, but this makes the most sense to me. Physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. Now, of course, they all blend. It's a blurred line because that is how everything is connected, as we know, and that's why holistic practices make more sense, because it's looking at the whole, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional. But I just wanted to welcome all the spirits that may be listening that aren't in the physical right now, around me. And then if you just want to welcome the spirits that are around you that are listening, to listen, because they might not listen if you don't acknowledge or allow them to listen. I'm not sure that's how it works, but I have a feeling that might be how it works. So if you just wanted to allow this, because hopefully this could maybe help them when we get into the more spiritual and emotional side of things. Anyway, just thought I'd put that little caveat out there. Anyway, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. And the emotional is the soul, the health of the soul. Those two are the way I'm working it. What I'm learning, what makes sense, is that's kind of intertwined. So we'll build through it from physical down. And I'll just touch on each one. So physical is to do with, the body, your physical body. Like, how usable is it? Does it feel free and spacious and supple? How's the organs function? How's the digestion work? How does it rest and recover? Can you get into sort of parasympathetic recovery mode easily, or do you have to, is that a problem? Do you need a long time to warm up into the day, to warm up into something physical? Do you need stimulants to get warmed up? How resilient to cold is it? And are we too focused here? So mental is obviously to do with more the mind. How sharp is it? How's our memory? How flexible? Can we change tasks quickly? How well can we focus on tasks that we're doing? How stable does it feel? Can you fill it with things that you're doing? Can you empty it as well? I think that's a lot of the theme of some of this stuff, is everything kind of has its own ebb and flows. It's filling and emptying, and both are important, the breath in and the breath out. And spiritual health is a bit harder to define, because it kind of does blend, especially, into the soul stuff, into the emotional stuff. Spiritual and emotional are quite blended, but I do think there is some room for discernment, which I've tried to do here. And so the spiritual health is kind of, even acknowledging that there's something at play here beyond just the physical realm. It's an exploration into that unknown, and it's a very personal journey, because it's very much observable by you and hard to explain or pass on that experience. It's very experiential, the spiritual stuff. It's not as obvious or detectable or notable as the physical. And then the emotional is last and is related to the soul, because that's whether life feels worth living or not, fundamentally. Like, our emotions, how we feel day to day, like how good does life feel like living? Like, how much are we enjoying each day that we get up to do? If the emotional isn't in check, then all the others are for what? Not as, they don't feel as important. Nothing else feels as worthwhile if our emotions aren't in check. And so that's a huge factor, and we'll touch on that last. But how content are you? How easily rocked are your emotions? How much can you express your emotions freely? So those are the categories, the way I see it, to look at health. And then within that, I'd like to look at, for each of them, mine or our input versus our output, because that will really help us to break down blocks or reasons for ill health, or just to really discern input versus output, as well as that's sort of consuming or creating. How much are you consuming in that area, and how much are you creating in that area? Or what is your consumption look like, and what does your creation look like in each area? And also within each category, or at the end of each one, after we look at input output, I'll offer learn and play, because learn and play for me sit between input and output, or consuming and creating, because you consume something, or you're creating something, but learning and playing is that aspect of when we're kind of children and we're growing, where we can take something. Learning is like you consume something that you're observing, something that you're learning with the intention to then create with it, or to use that you're using. So it's kind of that in between ground. So it's like you learn an instrument so that then you can play and create music, or you learn to draw or write so that then you can create writing or drawings or something. So that's kind of that happy, fun middle ground, because of course we are creators and we want to be creating somewhat more than we're consuming. So the purpose of consumption is to fuel creation. And if it's not consuming creation, then in a way it's like there's almost a blank spot or a gap in our life, which is left room for a disease to come in, or as another something else to take that space within us. So consumption should be done with intelligence, and that's where often, because of addictions and other things, consumption isn't done intelligently. And so we'll kind of touch on that. And then finally, within each subject, I want to look at how a child would approach each thing, because I think we'll get into that at the end, but why I think that's important. But I think that's just something that we need to observe as well. It's like, okay, when I was younger as a child, how did I do that? Or when I observe children in my life, around like children you have, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, whoever you're around, you're a teacher or something, how do they do each thing? Because then we have I believe that's somewhat of a marker to see the difference between us and them. And then that's kind of a gauge. And so to begin with the physical, so what are we inputting into our physical? The obvious one is foods. Are we eating good, wholesome, nutritious, whole foods, unprocessed? Or are we consuming matrix? I call them matrix foods, processed foods with lots of mixed ingredients, with chemicals to make them have longer shelf lives, that sit in plastic packages. This is not to judge that. It's just to be aware of how often we're consuming one or the other, and then to just observe why we're drawn to something or another, and to observe if there are any negative ramifications of those decisions. Are we consuming natural supplements or minimal supplements that come from natural sources, or are we taking supplements that are, again, chemical pills from Big Pharma? Are we drinking? Are we drinking water and natural juices, or are we taking stimulating drinks, like fizzy drinks like Coke, Red Bull, something like that, or even coffee, which is, again, stimulating drink? How fresh is the air, or clean is the air? Are we living in a city, or are we out in nature, or are we making sure we get out to nature or to the ocean, where you get some nice ocean breeze, air, fresh air like that? So food, water, air, what we're inputting is definitely important to look at physically. And then with the choices that we're making with food and drinks especially, are they intuitive choices on the day, or as we're looking at the fruit or the vegetables or the food in the supermarket? Or is it addictive choices on autopilot that you're not necessarily in control of? Now we know food addiction, snack addictions, certain sugary treats that we need can definitely have roots in physical, in emotional issues, things that we've not willing to address. And I'll get deeper into that in a little bit, but we know that when we eat something addictively that we're not necessarily in control of that choice, it can cause problems. If it's fizzy drink is going to not only problems for the teeth, problems for the inside of the body, affecting the acidity levels in the gut and everything. And that's just, we know that's kind of a recipe for disaster, basically. And how much are we desiring damaging things, cigarettes or alcohol? Like, how much do we feel drawn to that stuff, even though we know it's damaging in a way? How much do we not feel like we have a choice over wanting that stuff or validate it or justifying it? Stimulants, the same thing. So really starting to recognize what is stimulants. We know caffeine is a stimulant, so obviously, like I said, Coca-Cola, but acknowledging coffee as a stimulant as well, I think, is important. Even chocolate, or chocolate today is a stimulant in itself. Sugar is a stimulant. Even to things like onion and garlic are stimulants, and people use them addictively in their food. I see these things more as, makes sense that they're more medicinal. They're so potent. I don't eat those garlic or onion anymore, and when I notice it now, if I'm in someone's house or I've had my mother's food and then didn't realize it was in it, and then I had a bite, and I didn't refuse it after that. I wasn't like completely anal about avoiding it, but when I had it, I was like, whoa, this is so much more potent than it used to be. The fact that I don't have it, and I could tell that there was just something literally stimulating about that as a food, and so it can be overused, a natural medicine that God provided in nature that's been turned into everyday kind of abused substance in a way. Now there's obviously a spectrum of how much frequent use of certain things is going to have a negative impact over other things. That's for each of us to discern. But yeah, are we overeating or are we stopping when we're satiated? Is food the highlight of the day, or is it an equally pleasurable part of the day to the other parts of the day? How much chemicals are we using in soaps, in toothpaste, shampoos, sun creams that we're putting on ourselves, injections we're having? Obviously, big pharma chemicals, all these kind of things we're putting on our skin, makeup. This stuff is full of unnatural chemicals, which is going to have a consequence, and that's, I guess I kind of touched on that in the battle for health. So output of the physical basically kind of, to me, makes sense. Where do you spend your energy? So you've got energy from the stuff you're putting in, which the purpose of the food is through your day, a little bit of enjoyment, pleasure in what's created there for us. It's natural food, taste buds, all that good if used in a balanced, emotionally stable way. Output, where are we spending our energy? So are you using it to work on things that you enjoy, or are you using it to work on things that you feel you have to? So a 9-to-5 job that you don't enjoy, that you might not believe in the company as being productive for Earth or for other humans. If you're spending your energy on that, that's a choice that you're making. You have to be aware of that, and that's going to limit how much energy you have, especially if part of your integrity is not aligned with it. Training in gym. Now this is a big one for me. Now food has been a battle for me. I've definitely, just to keep out 100% real, massively overeaten for years in the past. Food was the highlight of my day. I've smoked never fully cigarette. I smoke cigarettes occasionally when I'll be out drinking, which is, things come in pairs or whatever. And I'd smoked a fair bit of weed in my 20s. Stimulants, I never was fully into coffee, but I did get into coffee for a little bit, and I just noticed how down I felt the days after. And so I've done all the things. I've worked, slowly working my way through them personally, through recognizing the negative impacts. So yeah, I'm not saying this from some high horse or something, just to be clear. So yeah, are you are you training to a nice level of fatigue, or are you going hard every day to go harder, even harder the next day? And are you getting adequate recovery and listening to your body when it needs days off, or are you deciding in this, ultra resilient, my mind over my body, and this disconnect between when the body's speaking and the mind's not listening? Are you using training to possibly run from dissatisfaction in other areas of your life? Which, again, if I had to list my top things, that's definitely one of the biggest things I've done, is using physical exertion and training to avoid growing up, really, to avoid having to be responsible and making life choices that spending my time in a way that could better myself emotionally, spiritually, and to use that to help others as well at the same time. It's so much easier to just go for a run or go to the gym and use my energy to do that than use my energy to actually make a podcast like this where I have to type stuff up on a computer. I didn't want to sit and type and plan and schedule and stuff, but actually this is the fulfillment I get out of this. When I get past that hurdle, is just so much more than the other stuff. That other stuff can be like a nice cherry on top and not the main course anymore. If that's my kind of, I'm sensing that's the way I'm supposed to live. In the way I'm feel rewarded in a emotionally grounded way. With your training, are you chasing numbers and visuals, how you look in the mirror, over actually feeling good, enjoying the workout, and functionality as a goal of what you're doing? Are you honoring the body's natural posture and alignment and working as one unit, or are you just isolating and focusing on, no, I want this to look this way, or I want this muscle to lift this much weight, being in the head with it too much? Now, it's not black and white. I do think there's an element of bodybuilding that may be some kind of pure appreciation for what the human form is. Like if you've seen Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you see the specimen of a man, and there's a natural innate awareness of the even balance of his muscles, of the way he's built them all, but it doesn't look dysfunctional. Whereas a lot of bodybuilders nowadays look like they've just chased size, every muscle as big as possible, without a respect to the overall picture, which I think is the main difference. So something like that, I could see there's a certain artistic element to bodybuilding, though I do think it probably is lost as an art in that sense in most, but I think it can be used in that way. How do your poos and farts smell? Like on a daily basis, that they are just natural. If you have smelly farts every single day, that is just a sign that there's something, either you're eating that doesn't agree with you, or your digestion has got an inability to basically absorb, or break down and absorb, or your food combining two foods together, or food groups that shouldn't be combined. And again, all this stuff, the digestion and everything, is gonna link back. It's not as simple as just eat a different food. Like, your ability to digest has got so much links into emotions and knots in the stomach and tightnesses from emotional traumas we haven't processed. So it's not like okay, you need to change what you're eating. It's not as simple as that, because that's how we end up in this age where I've bounced around from veganism to carnivore to long-term fasting and everything in between. And I think a lot of people message me that have gone through that similar path of vegan to keto to carnivore to coming back to introducing carbs to reducing the meat intake again. And there's a reason we're bouncing around, and just changing the food that we're eating is just changing. We're not getting to the root of it. If the root's emotional and we're just blaming the food every time, we're not really getting to the root of it. But that just as a natural God-given ability to have awareness of our body is something like how our excretions smell, basically, and that including BO as well, like how much BO we're giving off. And there's a difference between recognizing the difference between detoxing and the regular day-to-day one, because sometimes you'll change something up, you'll add a new supplement, or I recently did some foot releases on my foot that were game-changing, and I had night sweats 6 nights out of 10. I had night sweats, and that was detoxing. And there was, a certain smell that detox was giving off because I released something in my foot. And I don't know if the toxins are stored in the foot or because the feet are connected to organs. You know how reflexology works, and the whole body's mapped in the foot. I think there's 13 different areas of the body where the body is mapped. It's mapped in your ears, it's mapped in your feet, and other areas as well. So when I released my feet, all these toxins started coming out. And I knew that was detoxing. That wasn't because there's times I've eaten certain foods. When I smoked weed towards the end of that chapter of my life, there was a bit when I was having plant protein powder, and I'd wake up I'd get the night sweats from the weed, from the plant protein powder. And that was me detoxing out those, the way I see it, was negative things that I'd put in my body that day. Whereas when I released my feet and I was detoxing, that was nothing to do with something I'd released in my day. That was something that was stored within me. So there's starting to tune in. It's definitely not everything is black and white, and not all smells have the same cause. So you have to start to listen and tune into the body and talk to the body with that. Do you have energy to tidy the house? That was definitely a question to myself I started to ask. If I was going out, overexerting, the house was a mess, and I'd spend my energy working out until complete fatigue, and then I'd come home and not have energy to tidy the house. And I just think that this might not be for everyone, but for some people out there, I think that's an important question to ask yourself. If you're avoiding the important or the stuff you feel like you can put off, but to spend it on something that's actually just, maybe running away from those emotions. And if you can tidy the house first, you'll enjoy your workout more. I can promise you that. If you're someone who avoids that, if you're someone who's a neat freak, maybe you need to not tidy it. I don't know. Can't really speak on that, but your recovery is such a huge one. And knowing this is something I've started to feel and tune into since I took the stimulants out, I've started to notice it a lot clearer. Are you in sympathetic or parasympathetic mode? Do you know the difference? Do you know when you're in each one? And so sympathetic is fight or flight mode, amped up and ready to go, kind of gym mode. And then parasympathetic is relaxed, rest and recovery, rest and digest, they call it. And that's essentially, for me, if I'm able to nap, or when I wake up from a nap, I'm often in parasympathetic. And this is when if I go to bed at night and I sleep and I wake up and I still feel tired, it's because I'm still in sympathetic and I haven't left sympathetic mode. And that's because maybe there's fear that I'm not addressing or avoiding. There's anxiety, which is avoidance of feeling fear in a way. So I've definitely experimented with this lately. When I've felt anxious, I've been able to tune into the fear that the anxiety is masking over, that it's not and then I've felt the fear, and then I've entered parasympathetic mode, like almost instantly, and I felt my heart like untighten, And I felt scared for a brief period. I was shaking, and then I felt really relaxed afterwards. And this is kind of what TRE, trauma release exercises, is. Although with TRE, it's not so focused on getting into your emotions. It can trigger your emotions, which if you're sensitive to and you allow it to happen is definitely a great benefit. But TRE is all about getting into parasympathetic mode, which is where we access rest and recovery. And if we're not accessing that and we're just using stimulants to get through the day, we're writing checks that we're just not going to be able to cash, and they're just going to come. They're either coming crashing in now or in the future. We're going to have to pay the bailiff or whatever for that stuff. And so, huge one. Sympathetic or parasympathetic? What I'm in right now, can I fluctuate and adapt between them effortlessly? And just for me, the simple test is, can I nap? And when I'm napping easily, not just at any moment, but like, a few days a week or about 2 to 4 p.m. every day, if I've got space in my day, can I lie down? How do I feel lying down with nothing on, no distractions, not reading, just literally lying there? And sometimes I lie down, I think, I don't feel like I could go to sleep right now. And then 45 minutes later, I'm like, whoa, heart feels really relaxed. I feel really, it's strange because you feel really tired, but you also feel really rested. And there's a difference between feeling tired but rested and feeling tired but wired, where you're kind of like tired and not able to rest. And so I just think tuning into our nervous system, and that is massive. And unless you remove stimulants, I think it's going to be hard to do. And so some tests for me is literally that, how supple do I feel today compared to normal? Can I lie on a hard surface comfortably? I think that's a big one. There's times in my life when I've eaten a lot better, had a lot less inflammation in my body, and I've been able to lie on a hard surface comfortably, been able to sleep on the floor. But if I've eaten more matrix foods, more fake sugars, nasty oils, my joints are cracking, hard surfaces are uncomfortable, want to wear comfier shoes, warmer clothes, mouth breathing more, cold water feels like more of a shock to me, more BO, bathroom is either smellier or less frequent. So it's just these little tests, these daily checks that the body's telling us that for tuning in, we can know. How neat is your handwriting? That's one that's kind of a test that goes into the mind as well, but it's still the body. The hand is a representation, can it express what my mind wants it to express neatly, or are there blocks in the pathways from my mind to my fingertips that make it jagged or not smooth? That obviously can come down to rushing, which would be caused by an emotion as well, but also literal physical blocks, like a bent hose pipe in the kind of nerve pathways down the arm that make the writing unsmooth. Parkinson's being like the heightened expression of something like that, but like a mini version where we can't move in a smooth fashion. Can you go without eating for certain periods of time? Now, it's not to promote necessarily that as a lifestyle, but not into intermittent fasting. But if you have to, can you go? And it's not like zero energy until I eat kind of thing. And so the learn and play aspect of that was kind of the output, what's going on. But the learn and play with the body, definitely looking to children in a way, creating, we dance, play games, children, playground games like skipping and hopscotch and tag. Parkour for me is a really kind of good expression of play with the physical, interacting with the environment, because sport is in a way playing, and you learn sport and you play sport, but it's a bit more competitive. And I'm not so sure on the purity in a sense of that. Whereas parkour, I know as a hypocritically I've done competitions, but I recognize it's in its purest element. It's not about competition, and it's about understanding the human physical capability, just like bouldering and climbing. Explore. We want to explore with the body, explore environment, like hiking, running, cooking. That's a way we're learning and playing with the physical, with our food as well. That's like a loving way to utilize both. Singing, coordination, like I said, with writing and painting. So they're like physical ways to do that. And so the child's, how does a child, physical input, output to do with food and all that stuff. So a child can generally eat quite intuitively. And this is kind of a child before a parent may have impacted them to corrupt them, if I can use that word, to make them less of themselves and becoming like the teenager, the stroppy teenager or whatever we call it. So the child can generally eat more intuitive, but a parent may force... the child can stop eating when they're full. They can eat when they're hungry, or they want to eat when they're hungry, but a parent might start to enforce. This isn't, I don't know what's right or wrong. I can't say for sure on this stuff, but a parent will have their eating times, right? We eat at breakfast at this time, we eat lunch at this time, and the child's like, I'm not hungry. And the parent's like, no, you're going to eat. And then it creates a battle. But maybe doesn't have to be, I don't know how that, very sensitive subject, but generally a child can eat quite intuitively, and they'll stop when they're full. And they'll choose naturally. If they're offered only whole foods, they'll enjoy fruit. Eating will just be a pleasant part of the day that they'll enjoy a lot, but it'll be equally pleasant to the rest of the things that they do in their day that they enjoy just as much. The climbing, jumping, painting, whatever the child's doing, they'll enjoy everything, but the food won't be the absolute highlight of the day. They won't overexert. Physically, children don't overexert or overtrain. They run when they want to run. They stop when they want to stop, like a dog as well, or animals in nature that aren't running for their lives or anything. But yeah, children that tend to not overexert. That will come in when a parent starts to get them to be more competitive or have a goal that's to be the best at a sport or something like that. That's when that'll come in. But naturally, they won't want to overexert. They'll have no desire to smoke or drink. I know I had no desire to smoke or drink. I didn't understand it when I was a child. They use their whole body, so they express themselves with every kind of cell of their body when they're moving, when they're in their emotions, when they're playing, when they're climbing. They will just everything that they can. They're dexterous with their toes and their fingers. They'll jump up and wave their arms, and every fingertip will be pulling away from the center of the body. There won't be half-heartedness in the way they move. They have a consistent energy when they're when they're up-regulated, but they're able to down-regulate quickly, so they're able to just fall into a nap like nothing. And then they can come out of the nap, and you've got to give them 10 minutes or so, but they'll soon get back to being upregulated. So their ability to adapt to sympathetic and parasympathetic is pretty rapid. And they have a strong immune system as well, which I think is definitely important to note as well, that, that's a trait that we all have at a certain point that deteriorates for some reason. So moving on now to the mental aspect. And I know I previously said, I think mental health is majorly a product of physical and emotional health, and it's kind of a balance of those two. Because obviously, if you're locked in your body like a prison because it's stiff and you've got injuries and achy joints, that's going to affect your mental mood as well, and obviously your emotions. If you've got emotional stuff going on, that's depression and all that. That's going to affect it as well, but there's an emotional root for depression. So to blame it just on mental health is to perhaps miss the root of it. So the input of mental, because I'm going to get into it, because it is to do with the mind, and I think to acknowledge what we're inputting and outputting from the mind is going to help to highlight how we can find mental health with greater ease, I think. So what are we consuming? Are we watching loving programs and shows, or positive or unloving ones? I remember I used to watch Dexter. I used to really enjoy Dexter, Breaking Bad. But Dexter's about a serial killer, but they written in a way where you kind of understand his, you empathize with him as the character. And I'd seen an advert for it recently on the billboard. It's like coming back, and I was like, a part of me was like, oh, I remember how much I enjoyed it. I mean, I actually have no desire to watch it anymore, which is nice to recognize some growth in that aspect. But just seeing his face, it felt like familiar friend. He's obviously, it's about a serial killer and making you empathize with serial killers. And there's just something, obviously there's always something deeper going on with this stuff anyway. But yeah, what are you choosing? What are you drawn to watching? And what are you allowing yourself to watch at the same time? Are you watching stuff that's just a big reinforcement of like us versus them attitude, with the way that hero movies are done? Is this us versus them? Or the same with books and YouTube? Are you watching YouTube that's fearful, fear-mongering, even if it's well-meaning, conspiracy stuff that may even be true conspiracies? How's the messaging? How's the delivery? How's the person sharing the message? What's their attitude? Is it to shed light in a positive way, or is it just to project their own fear and encourage everyone else to feel the fear that they're feeling themselves, or they're even refusing to feel that, so that they want everyone else to feel it to make them feel better about themselves? The news, which is again a big source of fear mongering. Is that something you're consuming regularly? I think probably most people listening to this are well aware of some of this stuff though anyway. Podcasts you're choosing to listen to, books, video games, that's a big one. Like, I played a lot of shoot 'em up video games. I never quite got into COD. There's definitely something eerie about just playing a video game and being human, shooting humans. That's so normalized actually, and so allowed. Although, yeah, I mean, what COD, Call of Duty, you have to be 18 to buy it, but you can join the army at 16 and play with real guns. There's just weird little ways that things are done. But I definitely enjoyed, more like Mario Kart, which is I think racing games as video games are on the healthier side of the spectrum. Well, then shoot 'em ups for sure, because it's not normalizing shooting as a game, which is so weird. It really is. And then social media as well, like how much obviously input of social media. I think we're well aware of that, most of us. To output then, and I think this is a big one, because what I recognized recently is how much more input than output I was using my mind for. And I think they say everything now is vying for our attention with this current day and age, with social media. And if you watch Social Dilemma, you see how daunting it is that literally the algorithms to optimize and strategize against keeping our attention as long as possible on their software, so they can make money from ads and the way they do everything. That is so, even if on Instagram you press on search, and I just want to go to search something, but it will I'll see about 9 suggested things there that catch your eye, and I really wish they could just turn that off, because there's just no way to avoid that. Even YouTube adverts, I happily pay for YouTube. It's one of the best £15 a month I spend, because I don't get adverts. If you can afford it, I would absolutely recommend taking adverts out of your life as much as you can. It's a huge one that's so underseen. I think I should maybe speak on this more, because I don't actually see many people speak on it. But if you can remove adverts from your life, it's if anyone that's done that, that's got YouTube Premium, that doesn't get adverts on YouTube, knows how much clearer they feel about using that. There's just something so. When I'm at my parents' house and the radio's on and I just hear adverts come on the radio, I just can't. I turn the radio off, or I mute the TV when I don't really watch TV, but when I do, I'll mute the TV when the adverts come on. You're literally being used at that point. Your mind is being. I don't know. That sounds like I'm fear mongering now, but I just can feel that the whole thing behind adverts is, which is, yeah. So then output, recognizing how much I was consuming. Anytime I'm driving somewhere, anytime I'm eating, I would just be consuming. Mostly, to be honest, MMA stuff. When I'm eating, there's something in the enjoyment of eating and the enjoyment of doing, watching a TV program or MMA podcast. That was just not healthy. That I recognize, and now I'd say 80 to 90% of times I'm eating, I'm not consuming anything else other than the food, and that went from like 95% of the time, or even more than that. I was always listening to something that I enjoyed in a leisurely way. So it wasn't like I can't listen to spiritually nutritious content and eat. I can't do that. I can listen to spiritually nutritious content and drive or work when I'm cutting ropes. But if I was eating, it never felt aligned. I wanted to do something leisurely that was more kind of, like drama based or whatever, like TV or something when I'm eating, or the MMA stuff. But yeah, when I'm dry, and then when I'm walking, I don't, or running, don't listen to anything. But music's a big one as well. What you're allowing music-wise to come in, what are the lyrics saying? That's a tough one for me, because there's two big ones for me, is listening to rap or grime music and watching MMA content. That as I've worked on other stuff, as I've worked on the emotional stuff, and become aware of them as addictions that may not be the healthiest for me, that stuff has started to my desire to go to that has started to go away without having to fight too hard to just go, right, I'm not going to do that. My actual desire to go to it is gone, which is great. That's the whole point, is like understanding how to change these habits that we know are bad, and yet just avoiding or not doing the habit doesn't seem to solve it. That's what I noticed in, like we talked about before, with the fast that I did. Just abstinence from the thing doesn't heal it. The healing is getting to the root cause of it. So sorry, we'll carry on. Output. Can you say what you mean from your head into words? Like, how's that ability? How's your eloquence? Someone like Russell Brand is an absolute inspiration with that. His ability to convey, he's like his channeling is pretty impressive. And I think that is, in a way, how your ability to channel what you want to convey, bring it to life in vocabulary. Your ability to remember, even just remember people's names, like that's a simple task that I think we should practice and be able to do. Memory. How is your memory? Like, are you aware of how your memory is? Are you aware of your memory fading, in a way? Creativity, creative. We'll get into more specifics with that, but output creatively. Can you focus on tasks? Can you change tasks flexibly? I guess this is input and output, or learning, but maths, science, language, and art are kind of all mental abilities of the mind that every human was born with the ability to do. And we may have at some point became, we're not the best at maths and got scolded for it, and therefore we've carried this belief around us that we're not good at maths, when actually all humans have the capacity to understand mathematics to a certain degree. Now, different people have, different propensities and drawn to excel at different things for sure, but we all have a natural capacity to understand math, science, language, and art. Art's a bit more objective, subjective. It's a bit harder to define, but the other stuff I think we all naturally have an ability for, and then we can go into certain ones to excel. But you can recognize if you got a bad maths grade at one point at school and got negative repercussions for it, that might have scarred you for the rest of your schooling years, and then you just believed yourself bad at maths, when that's not true. You can do maths, you can understand scientific stuff, but it's how do we heal that injury that's come in and nurture it. So filling and emptying the mind, this is part of what I find so important. And when I say filling, I realized how much I was consuming and not filling with my own choices, with this, where learning and playing is where consuming and creating meet. And that's where the mind flourishes. That's where the mind feels fulfilled in a way. That's what strengthens the mind. What challenges and grows it and utilizes it and works it. And so there's been periods in my life when I've had space, time, motivation, inspiration, and recognized, man, I'm a human. And it's been a long time since school, school can ruin learning for all of us because of the way it's delivered in regimented fashion. Like the way we work as humans and what I've allowed myself to do, and I recognize people like Weck does, people that are free and have the time and space, they get into a subject and you just go deep into that subject for weeks or even months, and you just fill your day with learning about it and practicing it and everything. And I think that's okay. I think that's how humans are meant to learn. Not this, I better just, I've done enough of that now, I better stop that before I overdo it, and then obviously there's different ways to overdo different things, and you got to check if you're in addiction with what you're doing. But there's something that you can be inspired to learn about, that you can wake up wanting to study or practice, like an instrument or something else. There's a healthy amount, and again, you have to discern for yourself and recognize the difference between the healthy and unhealthy amount. But we are meant to learn, and we're meant to enjoy learning, and we're meant to learn through play as well. And so I got myself, when I had space and time, I was like, right, I'm going to learn language. So I got Duolingo, like I think a lot of people have got Duolingo app. But then I was like, this doesn't feel quite like it's learning like properly. It's just like playing random choice games and stuff. You can learn little bits and get words for sure, but actually to learn the language. So I did some research and discovered an app called Pimsleur, and it's 30 minutes each class. And I was doing Spanish, and I think there was like 30 lessons in the first one. And so each day at some point I'm driving most days for 30 minutes or 50 minutes each way. And I do the Spanish lesson, and it says something. It says it in English, it says it in Spanish, you repeat it in Spanish, or it says it in English and you just say what it is in Spanish. And as it goes, it leaves spaces in the thing. And by the end of the 30 minutes, sometimes halfway in, my brain felt like it was so tired. And I was like, that is what learning feels like. I haven't actually learned in a decade. I've not really been like trying to learn. That's when you're a child in school, when if you're not filling your mind or training or working it out, it is getting filled by something else. And it's so much easier. It's so much easier to go to just watch another episode of the show that you like, to listen to a new episode for me of the MMA, because there's always something happening and changing every day in that world. It's so much easier for me just to put something else on and let something fill my mind than for me to use and fill it with my own intentions. And I just really feel like that leaves so much space in your head for you to feel empty and lost when you lay in bed at night, or in between moments that you're getting filled with that addiction, and in between the snacks that you're eating, and in between the friends that you're seeing, and the, you know, whatever other things you're doing in your life to fill your day. You know, you've got a 9 to 5 that you don't enjoy, and then you just want that pleasure. I get the struggle. Starting to use it. So another ways I've done the instrument is starting to teach myself the keyboard, piano. Again, this is using the tools out there. Like, I've got an iPad, your phone, are not good or bad. It's literally how you use them. It's how you use them. This iPad, I got it. I can do my language on it. There's an app called Musician. So the language app was Pimsleur, which I found so useful. If I realized when I was doing the Duolingo, which is the app of learning language, my brain never felt like that. When my brain felt like it was fried, that's when I felt like I was actually improving and growing. It's like a muscle at the gym. I said before, if your muscle isn't getting fatigued, it's not growing. Just moving it doesn't mean that it's going to improve it. It has to feel worked at the end of the day. So the piano I'm learning as well, Musician, makes it super simple, super easy to start. The time, you can slow it down. You can learn. I love learning. There's Mozart and Jan Tiersen and Ludovico Einaudi and all sorts of cool artists on there. And you can slow any song down to 1% to 5% speed. And if you can learn it at 5%, you can do it at 10%. If you can do it at 10%, you can do it at 15%. You know? But my mind is working, my fingers, my body is working. I'm getting dexterous. My left and my right hand are both working, because we get into that. The left hand grows the right hemisphere of the brain, and the right hand, when that gets used, grows the left hemisphere of the brain. So many of us are right-handed. We've got a strong left side of the brain, which is the intellectual, the logical side of the brain, but we're not very active with the left hand. We've just chosen that it's the weaker side, so then we don't use it for anything, so therefore it gets even weaker, which is linked to our right side of our brain, which is our creative side of our brain. So there's a really good book on that. Whole brain science. I think it's called Whole Brain Science, and that's about you learning to use your whole brain. So another way that I fill my brain is in this left hand, right hand thing, just like piano. Your left and your right hand, there's rhythm involved, there's timing, there's real dexterous with the precision of each finger you've got to use. You're trying to match the time. You're looking at the thing, your brain's working anyway. So another thing I do is I write with my left hand. In the morning, I wake up and there's a prayer that I really like, and I'll write a sentence with my right hand, and then I'll write the sentence with my left hand. This is in cursive, so it all connects up. And I'll write it left hand but backwards, so it mirrors the right hand. So I'm learning to evenly balance out both ways. Now, you could think it's for nothing because it's not to be read, but although learning to read backwards is quite cool as well. But it's literally training my left hand and giving it some love and going, my left hand, you're just as valuable. What if in a world we could be ambidextrous? What if that is how we're meant to be, but we've just never fueled or given that hand? And that's one thing that you learn, is the more you improve your non-dominant or subdominant side, the more your dominant side even improves as well. And that's one thing that by the third sentence, my right hand is so much neater than the first sentence, because I've been training my left hand. And that is just beautiful. That's the makeup and design of how the body and the mind work together. And that when we feed one side, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I need to do a whole episode on this subject, actually. Didn't want to burn out on it just in this one. I've got other stuff to get to. Other brain training, like Sudoku. I enjoy Sudoku. Then no one listening to this cannot do Sudoku. I've bought a Rainbow-ku, which is Sudoku done with colours, for my niece when she was 7, and she could do that. She was doing 6x6 ones. It's just logic. It's just removing what's possible, removing what's not possible, and calculating from there. It's just straight logic. There's no guesswork in Sudoku, and something like that I find quite enjoyable. But I have been addicted to that in the past, where again I was just doing Sudoku, listening to my leisurely stuff, in an unhealthy amount. There's a healthy amount to do, and I was just like avoiding other things in life and just doing Sudoku. Right, eventually the time will pass, and then tomorrow will come, and I can do a new training again or whatever. So yeah, creative writing, drawing, choosing books over TV. When you read a book, there's a marriage that happens between your imagination and creating imagination and the input and output. The input of the book and the words into the output of the imagination. Whereas with TV, it's purely input. You're just being blasted with it, and your mind is not functioning as much. Although there can be a use for TV in triggering of emotions, if that's how you want to utilize it, and that there is a good utilization for TV and movies and stuff. But is the TV that you are watching, are the themes loving? Have the main characters, what are they like? So I really enjoy movies and TV shows where the main characters have a pure heart, or as I can discern, a pure heart. So Studio Ghibli movies tend to have really good characters with pure hearts, and some movies they have with no bad characters as well in the whole thing. But yeah, like Pom Pom Poko, I think that's one of the movies they did. I watched that more recently. Princess Mononoke, although she's got definitely a little bit of a dark edge, but some trying to save the forest. I can't remember the name of the other one, and it's actually my favorite one. It's completely gone from me. But there's another one where another hero is a princess and she's trying to save the forest, and the humans are blaming the forest for the poison. But the reason the forest is poisonous is because the humans are toxic, dumping toxic waste in the forest. And it's just a really cool movie with a pure-hearted hero. Hunter x Hunter from anime, the main character Gon in that, has got a really pure heart. Avatar, Last Airbender, that's another one where I like these shows where it's just inspirational to see, to someone like Jesus, obviously, as well. Someone with a pure heart who has emotional bravery. And that's something to acknowledge and to look for in these shows. Because it's one thing to have, Iron Man hero bravery, where they're just fighting bad guys in the physical, but emotional bravery, vulnerability and righteousness in the good kind of way. I think that's something to observe and to notice when you do see it. So that was how you fill your mind. How do you empty your mind as well? Because it's the breath in and the breath out. So going for walks on your own, with leave your phone I leave my phone in the car. Being with yourself with no distractions. Meditating, again, not something I do massively, but want to get into more of that potentially. But I do other practices where I feel like I'm on my own and in my space. Can you nap? I think that's a good one for emptying the mind, for not having it racing all the time. Journaling is a good way to empty your mind and get your thoughts, ideas, emotions out, because sometimes I definitely feel like mentally constipated with all these ideas, and just writing it down helps me to clear that load out. An ability to do nothing and appreciate that. I think the more you can appreciate doing nothing, the more doing something feels special. So I think that's one of those things where it's like, if you can, be like a cat and just do nothing for half an hour. And then when you do go for the, whatever you wanted to do or you're waiting to do, that can become, you feel even more. It's like, I'm not good at this by any means yet, but I'm trying to drive and not always listen to stuff, because that ability is just so easy now, isn't it? To just put something on, even if I deem it like, spiritually sound content, whatever. Even just driving and just being in your thoughts. If you're going somewhere, then if you're driving, say you're on a 2-hour drive to meet some friends, and you listen to nothing for 2 hours, then you do end up in their company. I think you'll appreciate it even more than if you were just listening to something the whole 2 hours. Yeah. So how does a child use their mind, or how does it build and develop it or utilize it. They learn incredibly well. They're absorbent like sponges, and they learn best through play rather than through like regimented forcing. This is for this hour you're going to do this subject, then this hour you're going to do this subject. They're just going to go on the natural desire, and they're going to learn best through play. They pick up language quickly. Children that can speak multiple languages because the household does it when they're younger. We find it a lot harder as adults, I think, to learn languages quickly, but as a child they can create freely. They're hardly bored by themselves. They naturally want friendliness and openness. They're put in quotation marks gullible. Now, for me, calling someone gullible is a way to shut down someone's openness, and it's really snide in a way, because children are open and they're trusting, and if they're open to ideas and they're open to look at things equally in a way, and then if someone has a belief that you don't agree with, to call that gullible is definitely unfair. And that's where subjects that I've spoken about in the past that I've been people have used against me, people have used it as attacks on my character because I've spoke about these subjects like flat earth and urine therapy, which I just think are subjects that why can't we have open conversations without having to mockery or anything like that. I think if there are humans out there that believe the earth is flat, why can't we just listen to them without saying, no, you're wrong because of this? Actually, like, if they believe such a thing that sounds so ludicrous to most of us, like, actually listen to their perspective and not the perspective that the news reports, because the news puts their spin on all that kind of stuff. How do these people present it? Because it's got to be scientific. They've got to have science. Okay, so your science says, okay, so if there's a lake and it's frozen, and you shine a laser across the lake, and it's a foot off the ground, and you've got a jet ski, and you drive the jet ski, and the laser is always a foot off the ground on the jet ski, even when it's 8 miles across the frozen lake. But the curvature, if it's 8 miles, then it's 1 foot per mile squared should be the curvature. So at that point, the laser should be hitting the ice, or the laser should be up the jet ski's back and off above the jet. The laser, as the jet ski drives away, the laser will slowly move up and up the back of the jet ski until it's above the rider's head as the earth curves away. And it doesn't. Oh, that's interesting science. I mean, maybe there's another explanation for it. But just to be open to ask the conversation, to have that space in your mind, to not have some, childhood emotion of people shun me and call me gullible for believing something that science, in quotation marks, has disproven. So therefore we need to shut down and laugh and call these people crazy for having that. Or can we be open-minded and open-hearted and have a conversation about that? Urine, isn't piss, it's a waste product. It stinks. It makes toilets smell. Why would you drink that? Okay, but there are humans that drink it that say that they feel healthy for drinking. Oh, okay. So what is in that? What do you believe about that? Why would you do something that seems so against, again in quotation marks, science, or against the mainstream narrative, and yet you choose to do it, and talk about it, even though everyone might shun you or laugh at you or whatever, and yet you deem it valuable to speak about? What is there, can you have that conversation? Do you have that mental openness, that space? The mind works as a safe place to explore beliefs before we accept them into our hearts. So it's like an airlock. So you accept them into your heart, or you protect it from your heart as a false belief. But it's an airlock. It's a safe space in between the belief entering your heart, and it's a place to discern with your own reason and logic, openly. Because if you enter a belief like flat earth or urine therapy, and you've already decided what you believe, and yet you've never looked at that discussion or that side of the discussion scientifically with someone who believes that, well, then therefore you're not ever going to, you don't even know, you don't understand the makeup of your own mind in a way, and how you got your beliefs. It's literally like the Theseus and the Minotaur, the Minotaur where he led the breadcrumbs, not the breadcrumbs, that was the other one, Hansel and Gretel, that was. Yeah, literally the ball of string into the maze to fight the Minotaur. That's literally your own beliefs. How did your own beliefs come to being? Do you understand how you got to your beliefs? Again, something like the shape of the earth. I started that discussion with, I haven't been up to space. I haven't been far enough from the earth to know. That's the only way I could know. So if we start with truth, have you been up to space? I haven't. So I start with that truth. I haven't seen it looking like a ball with my own experience. So that's that truth that I know. Okay, so therefore I can't laugh at anyone with any other belief until I've looked into that. And so that's understanding how my mind was made up. How did I come to believe what I believe about the shape of the earth? Well, I was taught it by these people. And well, I've seen these images on a computer and in a book. But I also know that I've seen Spider-Man on TV, and he's not real. Well, maybe he is. I don't know. I'd open to that discussion if someone wants to present something to me. But that's understanding the makeup of our own minds is such an important thing to understand, I think. And I think we've got to protect our portals, protect the heart. But the mind, as I said, is the airlock, is the safe space to do that. And if we don't even let things in the mind, we don't know what beliefs that could help us to heal and grow, that we haven't discovered yet, or that we've not allowed in, which is huge when we get into spirituality, which we get into spiritual laws of soul mechanics, because so often people have a belief about God that they've already decided that they won't even allow that into their mind to then discuss anymore, to then allow it into their heart, which could help them potentially. But they've already decided from young, that's that thing to do with that religion, and that it's superstitious and whatever, so I won't even. But that's where the mind should be an open place and a safe space to then discern, kind of, as just don't want to keep repeating it, but is that safe to let into my heart? Does that make sense or not? But if we don't have that open space and it's just a shut door, and yet we're not feeling healthy and happy, well, then we could be shutting out something that could bring about health and happiness. And just on the final point on mental health, a lot of mental health issues are emotional stagnation issues, and they're unhumble emotions in a way. So depression is very often actually repressed anger. And we've been taught by parents not to express our anger, or we're not aware that there's anger. And this was something in me. I wasn't aware how angry I was at the world, or what I thought was the world, especially when I was vegan and I was expressing all this anger at other people. And really it was probably anger at my parents that I was taught, not that I wasn't allowed to express my anger. They could express their anger at me, but I was grounded if I expressed my anger. So therefore, I learned to lock it up, and therefore that became depression. And it wasn't until I was able to express that freely in a safe and open place without projection at anyone, i.e. beating up a pillow, that's helped me to alleviate a lot of that depression. And another one to that, I touched on earlier, anxiety isn't fear. Anxiety is a refusal to feel fear. So it's avoidance of the fear that we feel, because we're scared of feeling fear, and that ends up in anxiety in a locked up place. So those two major ones, depression and anxiety, if we can recognize depression as repressed anger and express that safely without judgment from others and without projection towards others, and if we can recognize anxiety as avoidance of feeling fear and are able to get to the fear below and feel that, well, man, that let a lot of mental anguish out and allow a lot more energy and vibrancy back into the body. So I just wanted to touch on them there. And we're moving on now to spirituality. spirituality is making the unknown known. And this is about becoming sensitive, and includes learning to recognize spiritual laws at play, because we're all very aware of physical laws. If we walk into a door, well, we feel that instantly. But spiritual laws are a little less obvious, don't happen as quickly in the physical realm. I think in the spiritual realm, it's instantaneous or much quicker. But whereas here, because it's slower, you have to be very observant. And this is things like the law of attraction, the law of compensation, which is what many people call karma, the law of cause and effect, which is majorly what we're talking about here, which is where we're focused on the effects of a problem and not the cause of the problem. So putting a plaster on a cut doesn't solve the cause, or putting makeup on spots. You're just dealing with the effect, which is the spots, but the cause of the spots isn't solved with the makeup. It's something deeper than that. It's like if a leaf falls off, you sellotape the leaf back on the tree, you're dealing with the effect of the leaf falling, but not the cause of it, which could be, season, or it could be nutrition or whatever. Law of repentance, which is one that we'll get into as well, which is a very real spiritual law. And spirituality, it's hard not to blend. It does blend with the emotional and the soul stuff as well, especially as my understanding from the physical. It's hard for me to discern between the two, but it takes heightened emotional sensitivity and not intellect to become more in touch with spirituality. And so spiritual inputs, do you have any? Some people might not have any. I guess if you're listening to this, I imagine if you're listening to this, probably you listen to a lot of other spiritual stuff as well, to be honest, because to get this far, and if I'm the only person you're listening to spiritually, that's quite impressive. Is it truth with a capital T or truth with a little t? Is it God's truth, universal truth, or little or your truth? And I do think there is a difference, and I have been the person to say, live your truth and all that stuff before, but now to recognize that there is universal truth. There isn't individual truth. There are individual truths, but there's a universal truth to everything, and it's not just what you believe is therefore the truth. It's not just like, that's quite a new age spiritual belief that it's just whatever you believe is true, and it's just not quite how it works. I don't see that anymore. Is this spiritual input that you're having, is it logical and precise, or is it loose and like empty words, which I see in a lot of new age stuff? Is it a loving message or a fearful message? Is it open or is it controlling? Is it inclusive or exclusive? Because a lot of, especially religions, can be, quite exclusive. If you don't believe what we believe, that's it. So, you go into hell and all that. Or using anger and fear to control people. Or if you question this religion, then that's it. You're going to hell again. If using things to control rather than, no, if we don't have a fear. If we just care about the truth. If you look elsewhere and find ultimate truth, come back and tell us, and we'll I liked about Buddhism. That was one thing they said, that if science proves Buddhism wrong, then Buddhism will change. Like it's not unscientific. So I kind of like that. It should be scientific and it should follow openness, and it should allow. That's why I like knees over toes guy and certain biomechanical systems, because they don't shun any other systems, and they allow you to go and explore other systems, and they go, oh, yeah, if you find something that's cool, go try this, try them, whatever. Whereas some systems don't allow you to even question and try another system without being completely, kicked out and banned from that system. And it's just, and that's for me, earmarks of cult-like behavior and cult-like religions is when it's limiting or controlling or using fear to control like that. Yeah, what YouTube are you watching spiritually? What spiritual books are you reading? Spiritual teachers are you listening to? Church, are you going to church? I've been going to church lately, and I've been going to spiritualist church as well. both been pretty cool. That's kind of spiritual input. Mediumship at the Spiritualist Church, they have mediums come up and give talks. I like listening to mediumship on YouTube as well. The Divine Truth mediumship that they do is really wonderful to hear. The spirits talk from the spirit world and their journeys, and just to understand that kind of side of things through that has just been, if I could recommend spiritual input, obviously Divine Truth, the teachings, but the mediumship they do, they talk with Buddhist monks in the spirit world and scientists in the spirit world and teenagers in the spirit world and all sorts. It's really cool. And then researching into the afterlife, I think that's a big one. So the way I've come to learn and see it makes sense. It's funny because when you hear it, you're like, I can kind of see that's possible. And now it just seems like kind of obvious, which is weird for me to say that. But that you have a physical body, a spiritual body, and a soul, and they're each different bodies in a sense. The soul kind of encompasses both of them, and the physical body, it's kind of like Russian dolls, I guess. The physical body has all of them, but the physical body needs both of the others to survive, but none of the others need the physical body to survive. So when you die, essentially you just go into the spiritual body and you shed the physical body. So this is kind of like the kindergarten phase. And I feel like and this is just what I thought about yesterday, humility is just so much, is not as easy to feel the benefits of in the physical world. It's not as obvious. It's not as rewarded to be humble as I believe it will be in the spiritual world. And so it's a great chance to learn, because humility shouldn't need rewarding. And so that's what I feel like was one of the big lessons to learn while we're in the physical body, is to learn humility while it's harder to do. Because in the spiritual world, and I think how you act is a lot more obviously either rewarded or not punished is not the right word, but the reactions of your choices is much more obvious in that world. So learning humility may be easier there. I don't want to say that as I don't know for sure, but of course the habits that you've put in place in the physical world might be harder to undo once you get to that place. So if we can put in more humble habits here, then when we get there, there may already be good things waiting, or things will be easier once we get there. So sorry, that was a tangent onto the afterlife, or the spirit world. But anyway, you've got a physical body, a spirit body, and the soul. And so learning about the spirit body and the afterlife and how things exist there, that's just been quite exciting for me and inspiring for me. And it does affect and change how I see things here and how I want to live here as well. And that's essentially, every time you go to sleep, you die. That's all death is. You enter your spirit body, and you live in the spirit world with your spirit body. And so it's not, it's the hereafter, it's the second birth, or the second life. So output of spirituality, and this is going to blend with the emotional stuff, but are you more loving in your actions and your reactions because of what you're inputting, because of what you're learning? Or has it made you just more self-righteous and see yourself as above others? Because I've been down that path of inputting spiritual teachings and then become more self-righteous. And I mean, that might not be the fault of the teachings. That's my error in my own soul, in my own way of act on stuff. But certainly, how are your actions? And I say your reactions, because that's often where the truth is really lying, is in how we react to stuff. If we're listening to all this spiritual teachings and yet someone cuts us up in traffic and we swear, that's what's really going on, And is what you're learning soften that or lengthen that time before you react? So for a child, this one's was a bit harder for me to, come up with right about, but because they're very much more physically focused, aren't they? Children, and especially the first 7 years, they're just coming into their physical body. But I think they're naturally they're loving in their nature, and also that I remember, seeing spirits when I was younger. Not often, but I have a few moments that felt clear and vivid that I feel like I am slightly mediumistic, or I was, and I think a lot of children are slightly mediumistic. They say that children see spirits a lot more than adults before the fear and the other things. The pineal gland gets calcified, or whatever it is that starts to limit their mediumistic skills. They may be slightly, but it's hard to have that conversation with a child to truly understand unless we're fully evolved ourselves and can help them, guide them with that. I think it's on us to guide children to spirituality, but often the sources are either, atheist households or dogmatically religious households, and there isn't much, as I'd call it, true spirituality, to guide them, because there's not that many. Well, as far as I see it, divine truth is the greatest teachings on that, and there's not that many people that follow that. Now, there are certainly loving Christian and Muslim and Buddhist households that can do somewhat of a job of guiding the child, but I think just nothing seems as on point as divine truth in their teachings. And if more people understood that, then we're able to experiment and develop our souls in that way that they teach, and then the way we'd be able to raise children would be so much more potential for the child. And that, I think, I remember Seven Bowman always saying about the kind of Greeks philosophers, the skill is in the teacher, and the teacher's job is to help the child find their genius in whatever that is. Like, we all have our own genius, our own soul purpose, and if you can help someone find their soul purpose, that is your role as a teacher. And if we don't even know our purpose, that's hard to then guide someone else to their purpose. And if we're still dealing with our own traumas and our own issues, that's going to be so much harder to do that. I also wrote, children have invisible friends, or do they? Are they spirits that they see? Yeah, or maybe they are invisible friends, and that's their imagination, and that's fine. They are able to play and explore and experiment, and that's what I wrote here for an encouragement for you to learn and play with spirituality. Of course, I'd encourage you to listen to some of the teachings I've mentioned, but one thing I've been doing more is talking out loud as though there are spirits around me, talking to them. I think I've met my spirit guide or been introduced, finally got his name, Robert, so shout out to Robert. But I talk sometimes as though they can hear me, and I talk to them, and I feel like I get ideas drop in my head that's from them, and that this is the what's beautiful and hard about this is that it never feels concrete. At this point, it doesn't feel concrete anyway, and so that's where the faith comes in. When I'm having conversations with spirits, is it just in my head, But I don't even think I'm going like I'm. You think, I could be going crazy, but I don't even think that. I think I just feel like a child when I'm doing it. I'm just talking to someone that may or may not be here, and I don't judge it. It's just, and it actually makes me feel like, I don't know, calmer, chill, like cool, more. I guess less lonely, but I'm not doing it to feel less lonely. Like, I don't feel that, but it just makes you feel like you're around, you're guided and protected. You know what they say? I'm guided and protected. Like, I feel guided and protected. And the more I interact and offer that as an interaction, the more I feel like I'm getting results and able to tune into answers, even if they don't feel concrete, like I say. and you play with channeled writing. I've been doing that occasionally. I've not done it much, but just in the evening, take a pen to paper and just let my arm move. And it was just like with the light off almost. And then at the end, turn the light on and just see if there's any words that stand out, something like that. I saw the word Rob, so I also thought that might be Robert coming through with that. But and I saw something recently called light language, where people just channel light language, as they call it, and they're just speaking, and it sounds like a language that I don't think they understand themselves, but they're just allowing a being to come through them, and they say it feels healing to them, and the message has got love in it, even if you don't understand it, verbally, intellectually. So that was something that came to my attention recently. So maybe that's you. Maybe you've can channel light language, or something for you to research light language. I thought it was quite cool, where they just start, it's like speaking in tongues, right? They're just speaking in tongues, and it could be a being from a higher realm who understands love greater than we do, speaking their language, Palladian or Arcturian or something like that. But yeah, it could be something to play with channeling that, or try to get into. I think tonight actually is the night when they do the mediumship circle at the spiritual church. I'm going to go to that. So that's me learning and playing with spirituality. And there's a book, Paulo Coelho, I think it was called Manual of the Warrior of Light. And I've not got the exact quote here on my internet. I'm staying off the internet, so I can't get it right now. But it was just saying how the Warrior of Light talks to himself out loud so frequently until eventually he recognizes the angels speaking through him, or something to that effect. And I always thought that was really cool. And that's that similar thing where I think just speaking out loud when you're a child. Well, actually, when I'm happy, I notice that I speak out loud a lot to myself, and it can just be mumbling or whatever. But I think we learn to shut that up. Children speak to themselves a lot, and I think that's just a natural thing that we could do, is just speaking out loud and just letting let it flow, rather than that stopgap at the voice, at the mouth go. Just let the thoughts bounce around in the head, because we kind of associate that with someone being crazy if they're talking to themselves, but it doesn't have to be. Maybe they've just not got that block. I mean, they probably are crazy people, but they just don't have that block, and then they've got the crazy stuff coming through. But we can just remove the block, but not have the crazy necessarily. And so on to the final point, emotional soul health, the highest level. This is the root, the top of the mountain, the most important one, that if you get this right, everything else gets flooded with health as well, I believe. This one needs a whole talk on itself, which I'm sure I will do in the future. But we'll glance on it here and now. So yeah, if you only focus on this one, like I say, the health will flow freely, like it does for children. Children with their healthy eating habits, consistent energy, ability to deep rest well, a loving attitude and an openness, a supple body, ability to learn, good memory, creative, have fun anywhere, happiness with seemingly no reason, and joy in your heart. If we can get emotional health to the right point, all that stuff will come. And so I want to reverse the order on this and start with the child, reverse engineer how is a child with their emotions. So even a baby, before they can barely even see, like at their eyes, they can still feel love, and they can receive love and give love. So as a very little baby, that they're already, this is switched on. They can't speak, they can't draw or create like that, but emotions, that's something that they're born tuned into love. They know when love's there, they would know when love's not there. So it's the fundamental starting essence of it all, So with the child, emotions can flow freely, provided they've not learned to suppress them yet. And the emotions, they're in their emotions consistently. There's never, if you've been around children, which you probably all have, and you think about it, There's never a moment they're not expressing themselves emotionally. Or you could tune into a child, apart from when they're maybe locked in on a TV or an iPad, right? Which is certainly something to think about. You could tune into them and write down an emotion that you think that child's feeling in any moment. Maybe that's something to try, like walk around the supermarket, and if you see a child, just go, what emotion is that child in right now? Oh, they're in that. And I think, it's mostly going to be happy, and then it's very clear when they're not. Their emotions are not stuck. So then, like I say, because they're constantly in a flow of emotions, they're not stuck at any one emotion or bottled up. And they get over things quickly because they express what they're truly feeling in the moment, and then they're over it. Whereas adults, we can bottle stuff up and then hold resentments against other adults. With the children, you don't hold resentments to them very often, and they don't hold resentments to you, no matter how unloving you may have been to them. Sometimes, obviously, it will add up over time, whatever. But and even if they do stuff to you, sometimes in their own reaction, you don't generally hold it against them. Like if an adult lashed out the same way, you might never speak to them again. They're humble to their true emotions a lot more than adults. So if you take, I think this as an example, like with a child with a lollipop, if they're like 3 years old, I imagine little Pearl that I've seen, she was kind of one, but if I took a lollipop from her or chocolate out of her hand or something, she might just cry. She might just sit there and cry, and she wouldn't lash out at me or wouldn't try to hit me. She would be sad, but it was complete ownership of that emotion. Whereas if you do that to like a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or an adult, you just snatch something out the hand, they would get angry, they would project their anger at you, maybe hit you. And so that anger is literally a cover-up for the child that's sad inside, like little Pearl. So that person, there's a moment of sadness that is so short because they've learned so quickly to not be humble to that emotion, to cover that up, to suppress it, to reject it, to avoid it, that they then use anger as that cover-up. So a child, before they've been sort of corrupted or learned other behavior from the adults in their life, they're humble to their true emotions, and they just feel it, and then it's gone and it's passed through them. They get angry. They may get angry, but not depressed. So that, again, the anger, like I say, may not be the true emotion, but if they do, they may be 5-6 years old, they're not going to get depressed about the fact that you did the thing to them. They'll get angry if they've learned that anger somehow. But we've got to reverse engineer these emotions. So depression to anger to sadness is a path that's a probable path for some people out of depression. The child won't have that depression there; they'll just have that anger over the sadness, or they'll feel their fear, not anxiety. So, like if I scared little Joshua or something like that, again, he might just cry and shake, but he won't like start twitching and fidgeting and twiddling his thumbs and eyes shooting all over the place. He would just feel the fear, cry it out, and then be in that parasympathetic state. Children are happy most of the time. Generally, if they're not, they might feel anger, like I say, anger or fear, but that would come from the adults causing them to feel like that. But in their own natural, like a cork rising in water, they're naturally headed towards the top, towards happiness, as a natural state of where they're at, of their soul, of their health, of their being. It wants to rise to the surface like the cork to be happy, until the adults maybe hit that cork down and say, no, don't be yourself, don't express your emotions, don't be that way. They're also minimalistic by their very nature, and they're content with very little. So what God's given them, they don't need, they don't need 100 toys. They don't need 1,000 followers. They don't need 2 cars. They don't need new trainers. They very content, and you give them a stick, let them collect stones, things that are in nature is all they need. They're minimalistic by nature, and they're content with little or with nature itself. You give them nature, let them explore, let them play, adventure. They're very in their element with that. What is God given is more than enough for them to be happy. So they're also naturally, very creative. And I believe that comes through from that emotional state as well. It's just a natural thing that's part of that. So they're, pure and uncorrupted in a sense. And what corrupts children to take them out of this place of emotional sort of openness, and is adults generally, society, culture, what we think is teaching them, what we think is love that may not actually be love, tough love or whatever they say, or beating the child because we love them, because we need to discipline them. Discipline is a huge part of it, because we don't know how to teach lovingly or how to inspire and motivate. We're just like, I don't know how to do that, so I'll just use discipline instead. It's much easier. But what this does to the child, what this did to us as children, because that's what's happened to all of us. At some point, we had this trauma, which we may think trauma has to be some big dramatic incident, which it doesn't. It can just be parents using anger to control us. Can be being hit by a parent, slap bottom or whatever, grounded, locked in your room. I think I was sleep trained, where my mother would just leave me in a room and let me cry myself out to train me to not need to be around her, which has caused all sorts of deep wounds in my life that have played out in my whole life since then, till I've finally started to recognize what it was. But this essentially makes up, we all have a soul, and that soul has a certain condition. So what condition is your soul in? I always think that song plays in my head sometimes. I just popped in to see what condition my condition was in. And so the condition of our soul, if it's fully healed, which the only person I think has done this before us is Jesus, healed his soul, came through with a slightly less damaged soul, which is a conversation we'll definitely dive into that subject, how that came about, but then was able to then maintain that childlike ability of processing emotions in the moment and not holding on to them and storing them and locking them, which society trains us to try and do. He was able to not do that, got his soul to a condition of perfection, basically, of perfectly healed, which is why he stood out to the world so much, and why he's made 2,000 years of impact on the whole of culture to now, because he's the one human that was able to have a soul in a perfect condition. So ours isn't perfect, it's imperfect. And so we have injuries and wounds in our soul from what we've not expressed from childhood. And below those injuries is a real us. But above those injuries is the facade us. So there's the facade us, which some people may call your ego, the injured us, or the hurt child, and then the real us, the one who has a lot of love to give the world. I'm sure you feel that, like you've got so much love to give the world, and yet you're not able to express it in the moments when it matters. It just doesn't come through. And it's the you that's daring and unshakable, the unshakable you, immovable. But there's there's layers to get through to get to that. And so this facade that we've built up, that I've built up, that you've built up to protect the injured you, because you didn't want to feel what you're feeling. You don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want to risk trusting people again. You don't want to allow someone to do that thing to you again that your mother did when you were younger, that you fear all other females from here on in, so therefore you'll just keep that distance. It's a facade. And that's, again, yeah. So input, nutrition for the soul. Are we allowing people to be unloving and users or abusers? Are we calling them out on it in a loving way, or we're just stopping those interactions anymore and cutting people out of our life out of respect for ourselves? Are we recognizing codependent relationships with each other where we're just in it to meet each other's addictions? Well, they've got, a fear. We've both got fears of being single, so we're just going to be together. So we're both not single, basically, but we don't actually have much more depth than that. Or we just both like the same food, or that person really wants to give love and I just really need to feel love. So therefore we slot into each other's puzzle piece like that from our own injuries. So it's just this codependent relationship. Are we resisting our emotions, or covering up our emotions with, distracting or suppressing, with TV, social media to distract us, or suppressing our emotions with stimulants, foods, drugs? Are we truthful in our relationships and communicating open and honestly? Are we conversing with people with disagreements and beliefs, but without negative emotions flying? Are we seeking truth, God's truth about the universe, about his laws, about our own soul? There's two truths. God's truths, it's all God's truth, but the universal truths and personal truth, which is the truth about our soul and our soul's condition. And through seeking and understanding both of them is a huge part of this, of the soul health, of getting to soul health. Because if you can know the truth of God's law, of the universal laws of this place, then you can interact and function within them. And if you know the truth of your soul condition, well, then you can start to work through it. So for me, divine truth is that teaches God's truth. And then the feedback I've been able to gratefully receive from other people who have practiced divine truth teachings for longer than me, were able to give me feedback, personal truth, which I didn't know about myself, which once I identified in me, I couldn't ignore. I could see that in my interactions with them, and I could see it in my interactions in previous moments in my life. And then as going forward, I could see how my natural reaction and inclination is towards these reactions that they called me out on, which I almost rejected at first. How do we feel when others are unloving to us? Do we, can we just smile gracefully and just recognize that as they've got an injury that makes them want to be unloving? Or does that make us, trigger us? I definitely still get quite easily triggered when people are unloving to me. So, but just to know that okay, there's space there for me to work. So there's a personal experiment that I've been doing lately for input, for, as I say, soul input. And that is praying for God's love. As I say, I'm not Christian, but I don't think God has to be synonymous with religion or Christianity at all. I recognize that there's a creator. I believe that. And as Jesus highlighted, if there is a creator, well, can I communicate with them? And if they love me, can I allow that love? And it makes sense to me that God respects our free will. And it's like you wouldn't go knocking on your neighbour's door and then open the door and then go and give them a big hug and go, oh, it's because I love you. You'd be like, what the heck, dude? That's a bit weird. Like, they don't invade your house. God won't invade your space. God won't invade your heart or your soul unless you offer that, unless you open your door to him. Her. She's not going to intrude. And I noticed, because that's what I used to think. Well, I don't know, maybe there is a God, but why doesn't he just make himself known to me? Why didn't he just love? Well, he's loving you, but I have to open the door my side. There's a key, the keyhole's on my side of the door. So that's something I've been experimenting lately. And I believe I've been getting fairly decent results with that experiment of praying to let God know that I welcome her love into my soul, that I want to. And so output for the soul, emotional outputs. Are we unloving in our thoughts, words, or deeds? Because this is a sign of emotional health, right? If you're emotionally healthy, you'd be loving in your thoughts, words, and deeds. Well, if you're not, then maybe there's some room to grow there. And this is essentially, to use a word which may seem biblical to some, but is an important word that we understand and get over, because Jesus talks about spiritual laws. Jesus was a scientist of soul mechanics. I love biomechanics, and now I always loved soul mechanics, but I didn't understand that it was soul mechanics. Now I understand. Now it's science and soul mechanics. It's so much easier to understand. Before, it just seemed like wishy-washy religious terms. Now I'm like, no, this is actual the structure and form and function and the mechanical function of this. Sin is a real thing, and it is just simply to miss the mark of love. To miss the mark of love, that person said that to me and I reacted in that way. I probably wasn't that loving. As a sin. It doesn't need to be, I'm going to beat myself with 50 lashes. It means, okay, I missed the mark of love in that moment. Well, I would like to not sin, please, like as much as I can, I'd like to work through that. So acknowledging and recognizing it and not just going, well, it doesn't matter, brushing it off. No, there's something I can work on. There's a reason I did that, which I could work through. So therefore it doesn't happen again in the future. And so unloving thoughts, words, or deeds, even thoughts, it's still there. It's still very real. It's still, if people believe in the power of thoughts and manifestation through thinking, well, how about if we're thinking about another partner, we've got a partner and we're thinking about another female or something like that. It's like there's unloving thoughts there going on, that there's a reason for them. Yeah, how are our reactions? The soul dominates. So before, and this is a discussion I had with Devin Kelly, about the soul dominating. It reacts before, or it acts before we're able to act. So I think there's a story of a Buddhist, a monk was in a boat meditating, and he was in a lake, and a boat crashed into his boat, and he opened his eyes and got really angry and was like, rah! And they looked and there was no one in the other boat. And so there was no one to be angry at. So whose anger was it? It was his own lack of owning that emotion. And that was his true self, his true soul. It dominated in that moment. It reacted. He had an injury to someone else doing something to him where he wanted to be angry rather than to own it. Remember, like the child with the lollipop, you take it off them, they just cry. They don't get angry. So the soul is going to react and make decisions for us. That's why in those conversations, when you say stuff when in a rational mind you wish you didn't say, or you wouldn't choose to say, because it just comes out when the emotions rise. The true injury, the true feeling that you don't want to feel, that you've learned to cover up, that reaction is at play then. And so you have to be very observant in your life and notice when you've reacted in an unloving manner, and recognize that there's something there, some childhood emotion that's unfelt that's triggered you. So my examples, my mother, not only I got left, the sleep thing, and this is just my story. It's not to highlight this. It's definitely, people have got far worse, grown up with other traumas that can be much, much more worse, but we all have our own traumas to work through, and this is mine. She also controlled with anger, so much anger, to make us do her bidding, basically do as she wanted, and once washed my mouth out with soap and things like that. And my father, he was adopted, and I think he's not dealt with his emotions about his mother not wanting him in that sense, bless him. And he doesn't really know how to love unconditionally as well. So his only way to express love to me was as a reward for success, either physical in sport or intellectual, was when he'd express or show love in a way. So that I learned that love was conditional to being successful physically or intellectually. And so I recognize how much that's driven my life, that's wow. Well, that was a big moment when I realized that. Most of the pain, this is something that Jesus said, because there's those traumas, those injuries that I've had from childhood that then end up playing out in my life as I've grown up, gotten older, right? Those have just manifested in all my relationships and all my friendships. Man, it's so clear, isn't it, for me now? My relationships with girls, how I didn't want to make girl get angry, wanted to control them, not let them control me. And then with males, I wanted to be the physically, and intellectually dominant one kind of thing. So Jesus said most of the pain that we feel is caused more so by the unloving things we've done to others more than the unloving done to us. So those are the injuries that have happened to me, and those are injuries that are in my soul that I can heal when I get to the root of them. But because of them, because I haven't been humble to them, because I haven't solved them or healed them, my life has played out as a result of them, and I have done unloving things to others. And the unloving things I've done to others has caused the damage and condition of my soul to deteriorate more than the unloving things done to me in the first place. So that's why we slowly deteriorate. We slowly feel like that's one of the reasons I see for aging, or aging at faster rate than others, the more sin we do. And it's obvious, right? When you sin against yourself, if you drink alcohol, smoke, whatever, you're like, well, yeah, it's going to age you physically. That's okay. The physical stuff is obvious, but then the spiritual, the emotional stuff is less obvious. But if you're using other humans in any way, abusing them, that's damage done to your soul, which is going to add up and weigh up. And as the soul deteriorates, the soul is what fuels the energy of the body. The body slowly shuts down as well. So organs start to shut down depending on where the injury is, and all sorts. So this sin damages the soul, and this is where the spirit, this very real law that Jesus talked about, a spiritual law, just like the physical laws, the spiritual laws are there at play, less obvious, but if you're observant and sensitive, very obvious. Well, once you learn them, you can't ignore them. Repentance, again, sounds like the word sin, where it's this biblical term of 50 lashes or whatever, but it's simply feeling sincere remorse for what you've done. You do something bad, you feel remorse. When you're a child, you got upset with someone in the playground and you hit them, and then you get put in the corner, and you actually feel bad. You're like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. It's a natural thing in our soul, in our emotions. It's an emotion that you feel bad for what you've done. Now, often we've learned to not feel bad, or we've learned to brush it under the carpet, or to go, well, that's just an emotion, doesn't really matter, or we just don't acknowledge the sin, skimping money from people, or whatever it is, using the opposite gender for sexual pleasure, or acknowledging that and feeling the weight. That's my example, if I'm honest. Feeling the weight, that's what I started to do. Of what I'd done to our sisters. Not in a manipulative way, never in a deceitful way, but in a way nonetheless, where I simply had relationships and engagements purely for the sexual gratification. That's not cool. And that there's it can be a spectrum to you, what you deem as like, but I was on the same thing where I was like, well, it's not that I'm not being deceitful about it. They're okay with it. It was I still recognize now that was not cool. That was unloving. That's not how. That's not. If, like I said before, if we are children of God, that's not how you act, man. That's not it. I've let the corruption of the world corrupt me and corrupt my soul, and I want to reverse that, and therefore Jesus has taught very real laws that we can use to reverse the corruption happening on our soul, to our soul, through repentance, which then leads to forgiveness. Repentance, okay, I have to feel what the weight of what I've done to these females, and then I have to forgive my mother for doing what she did to me, for putting the injury in my soul, for projecting her stuff at me, for making me act this way in the first place. These are paths. These are the narrow path to healing, to the ultimate healing, to fast healing, if done right, to health at the root level. The river from the top of the mountain flooding down can make that flow fresh, clean water again, and clean the spirit, clean the physical body out. And this might sound just like a nice idea. This is something I've been experimenting with. This is something I very strongly believe I've been feeling changes in myself, in my soul, in my life, in my physical body, observing different changes with the practice of these understanding, and then the practice and application of these laws. So on output, as we say, repentance, this is output towards others, forgiveness towards others, prayer. There's another personal experiment. So one of them was receiving God's love. Another one is sending love to God, appreciation from the heart, not just words, intellectual babble, actually trying to feel it in my heart. And in moments when I am feeling joy, happiness, sending it to Him. And moments when I am feeling sad, not projecting it, just acknowledging the position. So how do we learn and play when it comes to emotions? Starting to identify emotions as often as you can. And at the end of the day, I started doing this, is journaling what emotions I felt throughout the day, what triggered what, when I felt good, when I didn't feel good, when I reacted badly, when I wasn't loving. Another practice is sitting with emotions, or lying with emotions, if I'm honest. But I started to do that last year, maybe a bit the year before. But then, the more I do that, when I feel something, it could be in the morning. And I'm grateful for the space I've I've created in my life where I can just stop doing what I'm doing and have the time. But if you can, either, request it from people around you, or hopefully they understand, or if you have your own space, if you feel something, especially the negative, sad, grief, anxious, just lying in bed, lying on the sofa, no distractions playing, lying with the emotion. And it could be half an hour, it could be 2 hours, it could be longer. For me, that's normally the time. I'm between 30 minutes, 2 hours, that maybe I'll end up, napping by the end of it. If I feel some of it, get through some of it, my body might, shut down. Then I wake up like I feel really rested and nourished, actually, sometimes nurtured. But sitting with the emotion, that's something I never did. That was actually just, I feel this, I'm not going to distract myself. And even if it doesn't feel like the true depth of it, but just to be with what it is at that moment, it might just feel like a hum. Sometimes it just feels like the hum of an emotion running, and I just don't distract myself from it. And then sometimes I'll have the next 3 or 4 days will just be absolutely like the most uplifted days, because for that 2 hours I've sat with that emotion, and it's done something where it's just not avoided it, and it's helped to pass it through me, or to let it flow and stop it being stuck. And then I've had some great days after that, and I've recognized that consistently. So the more I recognize when emotion comes up, the more I won't rush. If I wake up in a mood which the dream has put me into a certain emotion, I will lie in bed for 2 hours and not get up and just feel with that. Starting to recognize when you are blocking or avoiding an emotion with, like say with food or TV shows or something like that. A therapist could be a great place to start. Just talking to a therapist, talking about your childhood, talking about anything. I've been doing M&A therapy, which has been great. That links to body and emotions. But any kind of therapist, if you're not seeing one or never seen one, I'd absolutely recommend starting to see a therapist. For all humans, we've all got traumas which are all justified in feeling sad about. Doesn't have to seem hugely dramatic, but I promise you, we've got something. Experimenting with prayer, and prayer again, not so much the words as the feelings. So just experimenting. Maybe you've never done that. Maybe you've never talked to God, or tried to just say, hey, if there is some being there that made me, maybe you can help me get to know you, and try to feel that rather than, so you can use words as well. It'll help you as a human, but try to connect the feeling to those words, the true feeling to what those words mean. Another great tip I want to pretty much end on: hang out with children. They will allow you to express yourself fully. They won't judge your feelings. It's amazing when you can do that, and you just because often we don't allow ourselves to feel emotions because we feel too vulnerable around the adults that we're around, whereas a child, you don't feel as vulnerable, you don't feel as judged by them. And you still might feel some resistance to feel, but when you notice that it's only on your side and you express yourself, it's quite a freeing feeling. And then you can observe from them, as they're the teachers in a way. You can observe them and how freely they express theirs, meet them on their level. They have because they're less corrupted and they're less injured, and they've acted on their injuries less, so their soul condition isn't as damaged as many of us, because they've not, like I say, acted on their problems, on their injuries, and they've got less. They generally know love greater, and you can observe this I observe this in my niece sometimes when I'm upset with my mum for doing something, and she's just not she just doesn't see it the way I see it, and it helps me to just realize, oh yeah, that's my own projection that I'm seeing things that way, and she's just more forgiving, I find. There's a rule that Jesus talks about in the spirit world, that whoever is brighter, because I think there's more like light beings give off light more than if you are weak and darkened soul condition, you're a darker being. If you've got a lighter soul condition, you actually have you're a brighter being, literally. Then whoever's brighter knows more about love. So if someone's in that world, if someone's brighter than you, then they know more about love than you. And that's so it's someone who's more developed in love, they will have a brighter spirit body. And that's a bit harder to perceive on earth, I think. I think you can perceive it to a degree, but I think it's a bit harder to perceive. And then people are deceptive with Botox and fake tans, although you can generally spot that stuff as well, to be honest. But that's the things we do to cover stuff up. But I don't think you can Botox some light in the spirit world to be brighter than you are. But I think it's a safe bet that children are probably have got brighter spirit bodies than many of us, or their aura. You could call it their aura. They'll probably be lighter than most of us. So they have like I say, greater understanding. So let them be the teachers of this emotional health, of soul health. Let's look at it like that. Emotional health. Let children be the teachers of how to be emotionally healthy. So in the last podcast, I said one of my favorite quotes from the Bible: "Seek first God's kingdom, and all else will be given to you," which is Matthew 6:33. Like I say, not religious, not Christian, but just looking for valuable spiritual truth. Seek first God's kingdom, and all else will be given to you. What is God's kingdom? Heaven, I guess. Heaven is a place of a place of being inside, right? Inner smile, inner contentment, a place of immovable joy, consistent contentment. All the other I tried a lot of different things, and you can say, "Oh, Tim, were you just young, whatever, you didn't really try," I tried a lot of different things for healing. I went down a lot of things fast. I dive in with both feet into everything I do. A lot of the stuff, I didn't notice much growth. Like I said last time, when I truly zoom out, I didn't notice maybe some slow growth, not too much change. A lot of lateral moving sideways, a lot of honeymoon periods with stuff, which when the honeymoon period died down, the placebo died down, back to the old me, old habits, everything is still there. A lot of dead ends. A lot of building my house on the sand, the way I see it, not on hard rock. The wise man builds his house on the hard rock. I feel like starting to become a bit wiser, starting to try to find what that hard rock feels like. That's how you heal your soul. You should seek God's kingdom first. Heal your soul. Everything else will come to you. Remove sin. Work through emotional injuries, trying to identify them, try to identify the sins, the daily actions that are out of love, out of harmony with love, miss the mark of love. I don't believe that Jesus died for our sins, because otherwise we wouldn't all be suffering right now, because it's not fair that one man could just do that and then, okay, we can all just sin and do everything we want now because Jesus did his thing. Let's all, rape and pillage and everything. No, he didn't. It's our each. That's not fair. It's fair that it's a personal responsibility that we each work through our own things, and everything that we learn along the way of that personal responsibility of the journey of healing and growing. And part of that seeking God's kingdom, I think, because you can get to a certain level without God. I believe we can get to a level of decent health and happiness without God, but to get truly there, fast and beyond, infinity and beyond, inviting God's love in as well to accelerate the process, and working through any blocks or beliefs that you may hold in your heart to stop that. Beliefs about God that, synonymous with religion, or he's a fear, rules with anger, or, that, again, we'll have to have these conversations much more in depth in another talk, but just that intention, that start, that conversation with God, that prayer. So that brings me to my favorite verse. I think this is my current favorite verse in the Bible, that I think are part instructions or a piece of the puzzle on how to enter heaven. Because we talk about heaven on earth, bringing heaven to earth, peace on earth. We want it, right? It's not on us to force others to do it for us. It's like to change the people in charge of the world and everything that's kicking off right now. Being angry at them isn't going to bring it. The change happens when we change in our souls, when we do our own work, when we face our own shadows, face our own demons, when we challenge ourselves, humble ourselves. So my favorite verse is a piece of the puzzle on how to enter heaven, and it's also a clue. I believe it's a clue to know if you're making progress or not. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That's Matthew 18:4. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So I see that as a clue. So seek first God's kingdom and all else will be given to you. Okay, so how do I do that? Unless you change and become like little children. Okay, so got to become like little children in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. So the way I see it, you know that the healing is working and whether you're actually honing in on health or not, because you begin to feel more and more like a child again. Godspeed.